Injuries have become the all too familiar story of this Sixers season and impacting the biggest stars on roster. Paul George has found himself back on the injury report and set to miss some time due to a pinky injury on his non-shooting hand, while Joel Embiid continues to battle the lingering knee issues that seemingly are going to be the case for the remainder of his career. I want to break down what we know, how this impacts the decision-making process going forward for this year and the years moving forward, and dive into exactly what the status is for both of these key players. So let's get right into it. I want to start off with this from Sixers Adam Anderson of the Philly Voice, who's down there at the practice facility today, and states the full Sixers practice report did not practice. Paul George and Andre Drummond. Partial participants, Joel Embiid, KJ Martin, and Gershon Yabusele. Participated fully, Caleb Martin and Kyle Lowry. And he adds that Paul George will not play tomorrow, the Sixers say. His MRI is being reviewed. And I will note I'm recording this late Monday night. Still no update on what specifically that MRI said, which does make me a little bit nervous there. I did try and hold off and make sure that I did kind of wait for that news to come out, but obviously did not. So we will see what is the case to that point. And also is added, Joel Embiid was a partial participant in practice today per the Sixers. Quote, his knee has responded well to treatment. Now, I want to dive into exactly what the effects of each of these are. For Paul George specifically, it's kind of just another frustrating one to me that it was nice to finally see him begin to settle in and to kind of talk about what he brings to this team. Take a look at how that scoring is going along. Do want to pull this up here, that he's up to 17.1 points per game on the season, 5.6 rebounds, 4.7 assists, shooting 42.9% from the field and up to 36.5% from three. I do believe these numbers will continue to climb. That 21.2% from three is not something that I expect to be sustained. He shot over 40% from the spot last year. I believe off the top of my head, 53% from the corner. I know that was an area where I was incredibly excited about, thinking about the possibilities of all the catch and shoot looks from the corners he can capitalize on, playing off the gravity of Joel Embiid, and obviously that has not come to fruition for a variety of reasons here. But I do think has been a stretch of encouraging play from Paul George. His 30-point performance, still playing some really high-level defense, a better rebounder and playmaker than I think a lot of us expected, and I do think that he's starting to settle in a little bit. So it's frustrating that these kind of things continue to happen. Now, for Paul specifically, let's not jump to conclusions until we know something. I will note, and for starters, this picture, insane that Paul George even was driving on Broad Street following an Eagles victory. But when you do zoom in, you can see a little bit of a wrap on his pinky here. We'll wait and see exactly what the Sixers say and what his status is. But I also don't think this is like a non-zero story that he was driving down Broad Street after the Eagles. I think there's a couple different ways you can look at. I guess the worst case scenario here is he's completely tone deaf to the situation, had no clue what was going on, and just really didn't think about it. On the other hand here, I do think this is like a telling moment for him to experience what Philadelphia fandom really is. With all due respect to all the places that Paul George has been, with Indiana, with Los Angeles, I guess Oklahoma City is probably the most real deal fan base, although the Pacers have some real deal fans as well. But my point being here, he has not been around a fan base as rabid as Philadelphia. And I think it was cool that he got to see that up close. I do think this can go one of two directions. Number one, in the best case scenario, is he gets a taste of it. He says, okay, this is what these fans can be like if we're actually successful. This is what it can mean when you're a real deal high-level sports team in this city. Or there could be a world in which he viewed that and said, I cannot believe what I got myself into. These are the people I'm playing for. This is the status of the city. This is how these people react. And I do understand that as well. Not everyone is built for Philly. And I do think the jury is still out on whether or not Paul George fits that conversation. But I do want to circle it back to Joel Embiid in this, which I do think is the larger issue, not just for this season, but moving forward. Now, there's been a lot of, critiques and concern thrown in the direction that the extension was signed. That leading into this offseason, Joel Embiid still had 2 years under contract and a player option. Ultimately, as things currently stand, after signing the extension, that player option was cut down. The bottom line being that he will be under contract with the Sixers for this season and 4 more years after. If he can somehow return to being himself, there's no issues there. If he can't, the Sixers are going to have to do a little bit of cap gymnastics to make things work if you still want to be contending. Now, granted, I still want to approach this with a more positive mind. I get it. It's frustrating. Joel Embiid this season has played 13 games. We've seen 10 total games in which Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and Paul George have all played together. But to dive into a little bit of what we know, for starters, the updates here, that Embiid has been ruled out for the upcoming back-to-back games against the Lakers and Kings. The Sixers' next game is Friday at home against the Nuggets. We do know that he loves to get up for the matchups against Nikola Jokic, specifically when it is happening in Philadelphia there. My optimistic brain does believe that he might play in this game. And what I do want to make clear here, Joel Embiid still has the high-level, impactful basketball version of himself inside him. He is not washed from the standpoint of he can't play anymore. Where he's washed, or where the concern is he can't bounce back at the rate that you really need your star players to. As great as Joel is, and I've always pushed back against the narrative that the best ability is availability. I still hardcore disagree with the sentiment of that statement that I will take an elite player like a Joel Embiid, like a Kawhi Leonard, who are only in there whenever they can be, over a guy who is consistently average. I'll use Tobias Harris as the other example. You can play Tobias Harris every minute of every game, and he'll be there. He never will be effective as a basketball player as Joel Embiid can be in a short dose of time there. Now, granted, there's obviously balance, and these are extreme examples here, that there's got to be some sort of middle ground when speaking about what is ideal for a franchise, and frankly, the amount of availability that Joel Embiid has shown this season is far from acceptable. But the reality is they need this guy to be the franchise centerpiece. That as great as Paul George is, as impressive as we're starting to see Tyrese Maxey return and settle into the version of himself that we want him to be, as exciting as Jared McCain has been, all these positive things regarding this Sixers team, it's still all built around Joel Embiid. And I'll use the same example that I've done with the house, that you can put on the best windows in the world. You can paint it the nicest color that you want. You can build a deck. You can put all these things on it to make this house look awesome. If the foundation of the house is not laid properly, it's not going to be standing for very long. And that's kind of how it feels about this Sixers team. Now, granted, we still can be optimistic here. There is a world in which Joel just finds a way to straighten things out. That maybe it's this offseason that he does whatever surgery is required or gets some doctors look at. I don't think that is probably the case or the way that things play out. And to kind of keep it for this season specifically, I don't think that they're fully throwing in the towel. For starters, to take a look at these standings, the Sixers sit in 11th place. And I do think that these coming weeks until the NBA trade deadline, which is February 6th, the Sixers' actions will directly tell for what their goals are for the remainder of the year. But they are just one game back out of that play-in tournament and 5.5 games back out of the 6th seed to get a real deal playoff seat. There's about 40 games left in the season for each team at this time. I'm not saying that I believe this Sixers team is going to absolutely rip up the Eastern Conference and climb the standings, but I'm also saying the chances of that are not impossible. That look at the teams in front of them. Do you really believe that this Atlanta Hawks team is better than the Sixers when they are fully constructed? And I do like what the Hawks are doing. Don't take that as a disrespect. Zach Ricochet playing very well. They have some talent there. I see the vision in surrounding Trae Young with the wings. But my point being here, if this Sixers team can return to the team that they desire to be or were constructed to be, they're better. It's as simple as that. That there should not be that many teams in the Eastern Conference that scare them. These are all internal issues. Now, as I kind of mentioned when speaking about this Bob Myers situation and could he be taken over for Daryl Morey, when there is as much anticipation for a season as this Sixers year and things go off the rails, there's constantly a fall guy. There has to be a guy who is held responsible for that, whether that is a star player, whether that's a coach, whether that's a general manager. There has to be the blame laid somewhere. And that's kind of why I believe that this team is going to scrap out of it. I think each of these individuals involved feel the pressure. For Daryl Morey, that he hears the noise about Bob Myers. For Nick Nurse, he hears the whispers and the criticisms, and in fairness to him, he's been dealt a brutal hand with what he's had to work with this year. I have not been overly impressed with the job that Nick Nurse has done, but I got to be fair here, that it's about as hard of a circumstances as you could possibly deal with. Having your best players in and out of the lineup, never knowing with what lineup or what roster that you're working with on a night-by-night basis, and to Nick Nurse's credit, I do think this team is beginning to fight for him again and turn things around. Now, you can point to a couple different options for what is the most embarrassing loss of the season. I think the New Orleans Pelicans loss without Zion Williamson is certainly one that there's a strong case for as well. But my money's worth, I would throw to that Denver Nuggets loss on Tuesday, January 21st. That finished 144-109. The Sixers were not in that game for a single second. They let up 111 points through the first three quarters. It was a disgusting effort. Since that point, we saw Nick Nurse absolutely freak out to the team, both internally in the locker room and to the press at the press conference, openly speaking this. And the team responded. That we saw him produce a 132-129 victory over the Cavs. At that point, is still Eastern Conference leading Cavaliers, and then backed it up with a win over the Chicago Bulls, 109-97. While the Bulls aren't this fearful team that, this should be awarded a medal for winning that game, it was an important one from these standings as they're the team directly in front of them as this Sixers team starts to climb. And Nick Nurse has been quite open about they want that last play-in spot. They want to pass this team. This isn't just in early in the season. He is addressing things head on, which I kind of like as well. So I do think Nick Nurse is coaching to keep his job. I do think Daryl Morey may make the moves that will keep his job. That is going to be the priorities for these guys. Whether or not that is the right long-term direction of this Sixers franchise to be determined. I certainly hear out and honestly believe in the argument that in the long run, it would be best for the Sixers organization to add another high-caliber rookie that you can start to blend these two timelines, where there can be a Maxey, McCain, and say Cooper Flagg or Ace Bailey, that can be a core in the post-Joel Embiid and Paul George era. But where the focus should be for the remainder of the year is this can't be just a lost season. That when this was built with Joel Embiid, with Paul George, with Caleb Martin, with Tyrese Maxey, these are all guys that are locked up for multiple years beyond this, till 2028, till 2029, mainly a 4-year window that Joel has constantly talked about the lack of continuity. Even if this does not translate to great success this year, you got to figure out a little bit of something of how do you play together? How can you improve? What does work with these lineups? That has to be what's built on from moving forward. And again, all of this circles down to how available Joel Embiid will be. But for the throw the season away, people, there's also not a increased likelihood of next year, when Paul George and Joel Embiid are a year older, that they have a better chance of staying healthy. And frankly, I don't think there's any real correlation to shutting Joel Embiid down this year, and he has a higher chance of being healthier next year. The reality is, these are the cards that he was dealt. This is the issue he has to deal with, and it kind of is what it is to this extent. There's no magic wand they can wave that all of a sudden his knee issues are healed. There's no shut him down for the season, and all of a sudden things are fixed moving forward. This is what he's dealt, and this is what he's got to deal with for the foreseeable future, likely for the remainder of his career. So is this an ideal season? No. Is this a pretty telling stretch that we're upcoming, that what Daryl Morey decides to do ahead of the deadline will basically tell us what the, goals of the season are remaining? Yeah, there's still a lot to go down for the Sixers team. Personally, I'm encouraged by the back-to-back victories, that I would rather watch games with the Sixers team that they're at least caring. There's at least an effort on the floor, and far too often this year, we have not got that. So I'll take those back-to-back wins as a sign of a positive. We will see how they look against the Lakers and the Kings. Unfortunate that neither Joel Embiid nor Paul George will be on the floor there, but still a lot of positives to take of late, and it has not been that way for the course of the season. So let me know what your guys' level of optimism is as far as the injury outlook. Do you think there's any world in which Joel Embiid can string together a consistent stretch of physically being on the floor, or do you think this is a lost cause forever? Air it out in the comments. Appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning into this video. As always, make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video. I'll be back talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.